ensure that things like road networks are in place in order for them to carry the output of these mines and transport them, and all that needs to rise together. It is not rising. And I think that the movement for multi-party democracy has a blueprint on how to raise this to a true copper belt, not just in the copper production, but in infrastructure sector of developing this province. And I think that as we move forward, I'll be able to highlight some of those areas that we feel need to be done almost immediately.
Mr. President, one of the other areas that you've mentioned is the road infrastructure development. At the time that you served as Vice President, were there any plans which were put in place by MMD that were saying, listen, we are having investors coming into Northwestern. These investors, we have certain infrastructure deficits in this province. This is what we're going to do. These are the roads we're going to do. Because if you look at Solwezi Central Road, I think it's a problem that has been there time immemorial. Why didn't the MMD at that particular time take the initiative to make a dual carriageway that would have consumed this traffic which is now flowing on that road?
Thank you so much. I think that's an important question. The movement for multi-party democracy had a focus that if we continue with these levels of investment in Northwestern Province, we're going to have certain problems. Number one, like I've said, the electricity that was coming to this province was inadequate to satisfy the demands of the mining companies that were here. Secondly, transportation was going to be a problem because our road, Copper Belt Solwezi, Chingola Solwezi Road, was totally overburdened and was not going to sustain it. We started to talk about the Northwest Railroad. We started to talk about how to ensure that the road was done. So the feasibility studies to do this road were done during our time because we are focusing the fact that Northwestern Province was going to really become a better copper belt than even the current copper belt. And that is still our vision. So I think that I was not very happy with the speed, probably at which we were implementing some of these things. But we had to go in tandem with the investment levels. And we couldn't overspeed because other areas of Zambia still had needs that needed to also equitably be addressed as we were dealing with Northwestern. Northwestern grew very fast. Actually, the investments outgrew the infrastructure situation. And this is the problem that we have now. And any government that means anything needs to concentrate now on ensuring that infrastructure is done and done quickly in Northwestern Province. Because this place is going to explode under a responsible government. It will explode to such levels that everybody wants to come to Northwestern Province. Because this is where it's happening, and it's going to be happening in this province for many years to come. And those who are planning for the future are actually buying plots in Northwestern Province. Because this is where the action is. And government must get on board to ensure they provide the necessary facilities for what is about to happen. One of the greatest booms Zambia has ever seen will happen right here in Northwestern Province.
Mr. President, one of the other areas which I'd like us to look at is that the mining contracts. They seem even currently to be quite a thorny issue. You just mentioned that you were in Canada when Lumwana mine was being sold off. And the MMD was the party that salvaged this economy from where we are today. The copper mines were literally closed, and Dr. Manawasa managed to get KCM on board and so on. So my issue is, the contracts which were signed, did the MMD look at the future today? Because they seem to be quite supporting the investor more than the local citizen.
Chilwiji, I think it's important to realize that under President Levin Mwanawasa, I deputized him as Vice President. So what you're talking about is very, very close to my heart, because this is something I worked on very closely with President Mwanawasa. Our first responsibility was to kickstart the economy and ensure that investors get attracted to Zambia, both for the copper belt, which was actually dying in terms of investment, and we were very, very excited about the prospects in Northwestern Province. Our goal, the goal that we had as MMD, when Mwanawasa was president and I was vice president, was to ensure that the developmental contracts that we made with the impending investors, were such that inside them, there were incentives they could not run away from. And those incentives had to be included in those contracts in order to woo them to come here. That's exactly what happened. If we drew up those contracts any other way, we were not going to get the levels of investors that we got. Now, once they came here, they discovered there was real money here. They discovered that there is real minerals here. And now they continue to increase their levels. And it was, for most of them, it was 5 years. After 5 years, we're going to review those contracts. And after 5 years, we were going to make sure that we localize so much of that so that the government of Zambia and the people of Northwestern Province, for instance, benefit directly and more from the God-given resources that are in this province. So, as a government, our responsibility was firstly to woo investors. How do you woo investors? By telling them, look, if you come, we will give you a tax break of so much for so long. If you hire so many Zambians, we're going to make sure that you get this break. So that they start to realize, and one of the greatest attraction to the Mwanawasa administration under which I served was the fact that if you come and invest in Zambia and you make a profit, we made certain changes in our fiscal discipline and fiscal organization of our investment protocol. And if you invest in Zambia, make a profit, we made it sure that you could externalize all your profits without you being stopped. Now, no investor would turn that down. So we got a lot of investors coming. By them coming, we started to see that the mines came back to life. Number two, we started to create jobs. 2,000 jobs were created. And then 4,400 contractors came on board, providing jobs not only for the 2,000 directly, but also the 4,400 contractors who were being contracted by the mines. So this is what any government would like to see. I am very optimistic about Northwestern Province. We had to sign such kind of developmental contracts in order for the investors to come to Zambia. And as we work with them, as they like the terrain, then we adjust them after every 5 years or 2.5 years, as we had agreed, and then make sure they are localized to such an extent that government can have a bigger stake in order for us to move the economy forward.
Great. Now, I want to look at the issue of the contracts. Where did MMD slacken? Is it in the reign of President Rupia Banda? Because why weren't these contracts renegotiated? Because these mines now had settled, these mines now were making profits. Why didn't the MMD take advantage and renegotiate these contracts?
Well, I think that there's what is called confidence in a country. When you negotiate something, and my view as president of MMD, moving forward as we form government again, is that we really need to think through on the contracts we sign with anybody for that matter. Because time changes. And I think that once you realize that you are not really getting what you need from that contract, unfortunately, for the sake of credibility, you are going to suffer some setback until the time that you have agreed comes. Because if you are seen internationally to be hasty, whenever something changes, you want to change the contract and renegotiate, you destabilize the confidence levels of international investors. Investors, having worked as an ambassador, I came to learn one thing. Investors are one of the most sensitive group of individuals around the world. A statement made by President Sata today can make investors withdraw their money in a moment. So everything plays a part. So if we are not viewed as being stable, once we agree on something, we go through it sometimes with pain and tears. But at the end of the time of the contract, when we withdraw the contract, then we put into consideration some of the changes we need to do. We should never be seen to be flaky. Today we change, tomorrow we change. Nobody's going to have any confidence in our economy like that. And I think that MMD made tremendous progress. Even when we felt we were being injured and they were taking advantage of us, the economy was still growing. It became one of the 10 fastest growing economies, not in Africa, in the world. We were upgraded to a middle income country in the world. And our kwacha strengthened for the first time from whatever it was to about, at the time we left, to about 4.3 to a dollar. It's almost 6, 7, going to 7 now. So MMD managed the economy in the manner that we were an envy of a lot of African countries. We're being used as an example. Inflation came down to a single-digit inflation. These are things that Zambians did not understand, that we needed to work hard to achieve what we achieved. Now, under the PF, everything has gone into reverse. Everything is unraveling now. The economy now is losing its grip. We are going to get back to a lower income status of a country. The economy now is shrinking because no investor wants to come to Zambia now under these uncertainties. In the United States of America, if the president disappears for 1 week without explaining where he is, New York Stock Exchange would almost crash because confidence is shaken. We are privileged because we're in Africa, that the president can be absent for 1 week, 2 months, 3 months, and we are still having the kwacha at six kwacha to $1. And I think that these are insecurities that we have created within ourselves that are making our economy to suffer because we are not alive to the things that make the economy go down. And I think that we could not, answering your question, we could not immediately renegotiate in order for us to keep the sanctity of the confidence of the international community.
Great, Mr. President. Going forward, we've looked at the economy, we've looked at the MMD in its time of governance. When you took over the presidents from President Rupia Banda of the MMD, there was turmoil in the party, a lot of confusion, a lot of attacks on your personality and leadership style. What is the situation now in the MMD?
Well, I'm glad to report that, firstly, let me say that there has never been an organization or a political party that has lost power and did not face any challenges. I think that contrary to some of the views of the people, that would say, well, MMD went through those problems because, Nevers Mumba was a weak leader or something. To the contrary, I think the true picture is that Nevers Mumba has been very strong to handle a political party as big as MMD. Thrown out of government in 2011, a lot of members were confused, disoriented, concerned, and then all of a sudden, when we're out of government, the expectations of our members were like we should continue living the way we used to live when we were in government, but we're in opposition. So it needed a resolute leader. It needed a leader that could take in the punches. It needed a leader who did not throw in the towel when things were tough. There is no leader who is known to be a true leader except through a crisis. I think that my leadership was being tested and continues to be tested by the challenges I face and solve as a leader. If there's no problem in MMD, how are you going to know, for instance, that I'm a good leader? You can only know because I've overcome some of the biggest fights that I've ever come up against this political party. And so I don't look at it as a weakness. I look at David, in the Bible, he went through the same things. I look at Joseph, he went through the same things. There's no leader that has become powerful and respected who didn't go things. Whether it's Nelson Mandela, whether it's anybody, they had to go through the meal in order for people to say, how did they survive that? How did that happen? That's how you rate leadership. You don't rate leadership because there are no problems in that organization or in that institution. So for me, I'm grateful to God that he has brought us to the level where we are, where stability has come back to our party. And I think what we can do from this point moving forward is just now to start to do what we exist for. We exist to be able to organize ourselves to form government. So I'm very happy that our party has come down. The National Executive Committee has been resolute in solving the problems of the party. And I think that we are moving forward now in order to prepare ourselves for the coming elections in 2016. And that election is going to find me ready when it comes.
So what's your relationship with your national executive currently?
What is the relationship amongst ourselves?
Yes.
I think one thing you need to appreciate is the MMD survives because of its democratic tenets. Some parties would not have survived what we went through. The single parties that are led by a single individual, that his word is law, what he says is what happens, they would not have survived probably what we went through. But MMD has got space for people to express themselves, room to differ with the National Executive Committee and with the President. And through our system of democracy, we hear these things, we allow these things, so that the pressure that is supposed to destroy a party is released through their expression. It's only at a time when somebody crosses the line of our guidelines that we've prepared for ourselves that disciplinary measures are taken. But otherwise, I think for me, since I've been president, I have faced some of the most challenging seasons, but none of those has intimidated me, because I expected even worse than what we've gone through because of having lost power. So for me, I think that the National Executive Committee is enjoying a great unity. Whatever we have done so far, we have done it together. Whatever decisions we've made, we have made them together. And it is because of the unity of the National Executive Committee that we've been able to survive some of the biggest battles that we have faced since I took over office in 2012.
Great. Mr. President, we are being told, or the people of Solwezi are being told, that the council is being run by, we know that it's being run by the MMD, but the lack of development in Solwezi, it's because of these councillors whom the MMD leadership have told, don't cooperate with the PF, don't cooperate with the government, so that they fail and we don't see development. So are we blaming, are you the one causing this dust?
Firstly, let me just move quickly. That's a loaded question. I have 4 answers for it. Firstly, I think it's unfortunate if the Patriotic Front wants to blame MMD for their problems. The reason you take over government is to demonstrate that the previous regime failed and you're going to make it happen. The moment you start to go back, then you have failed yourself. That's number one. Number two, PF, I have never told our councillors never to cooperate with PF. As a matter of fact, MMD has cooperated with this government to levels that are almost uncomfortable. PF never cooperated with MMD on anything. We said one thing and they did the other. Mr. Sata personally spoke in the cameras, to the media, that we are not here to help MMD. We must make sure that in Lusaka, PF makes these decisions in the council. It was very frustrating to run the country with PF in charge of certain councils. So to answer your question, no, MMD has cooperated in many, many ways. Thirdly, it is important to mention that blaming the Council of Solwezi for lack of development is having no focus then. Because look, there are developmental programs that are not done at, some of the development we need in Solwezi is not going to be done by the local council. These are governmental projects. Because what is happening in this province, like I've already alluded to, these are huge investments that need a creation of another copper belt. The infrastructure, almost equal, if not better than the copper belt, needs to be put up here. That's not going to be done by the local council. That's going to be done by central government. So I think that to use that is symbolic of failure. Let me tell you the biggest problem that the PF has today. The crisis of the Patriotic Front is a moral crisis. It's a moral crisis because they came into government on a palette of promises that they knew in their hearts were unachievable in 90 days. But against their good judgment, they decided to lie to the Zambian people in order to get the vote. They will never, never survive that. Because the Bible says you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. There is no truth in what PF did. So they promised us within 90 days, you know the story, that we're going to have money in our pockets. I checked your pocket before the program. Unless there's another pocket you have somewhere else, there was nothing out there. And it's the story for every Zambian. They told us there will be jobs in this country, galore. There are no jobs here. Everything has gone into the reverse of their promises. The Constitution, they promised us in 90 days, it's not here. The Barotse Agreement restoration, it's not here. Everything they told us in 90 days is not here. I want the Zambians and the people of Northwestern Province to pause and think for a moment. Let them think for a moment. The moral problem we face today is a government that lies to its people and they go back on the promise that they made. Nobody's going to forgive them. That's at national level. At local level, here in Solwezi, the PF promised last year in 2013, they said they were going to provide 20.5 kilometers of local roads in order to prepare this town for what it's supposed to be, an investment center. That never happened. This year alone, they had promised 27 kilometers, which should be 47.5 kilometers of roads within Solwezi. None of that. The year is almost finishing. There's no sign of those roads. So the same lies that PF told the people in 2011, they have continued to govern people telling them lies. How many Zambians are going to take that, that spirit of lying another year? Not a single Zambian, except those that don't really care about moral politics. There are no roads here. The result of that, as you are aware, is that our people in Solwezi are walking in dusty roads. We have a sick town. People coughing, dust in the mouth. Our children are in hospitals where there's no medicine, there are no blankets. Solwezi is sick because of the dust that is in this place. So we need to deal with these matters. But it was a promise. They promised they'll give Solwezi a new market. There's no new market that has come here. They have promised Solwezi many things. A Northwestern province, that the headquarters will be moved to Kabompo. None of those things. Everything they promised Solwezi has not happened. The question I have, we are going into an election. Is it really possible for the people of Solwezi, out of their own volition, with all these lies, to go to that ballot box, on Thursday and cast a vote for a lying government? I am trying to reason, because Zambia is a Christian nation, and they take lies and truth very seriously. You can lie to them once, but not twice. We were lied to in 2011. I doubt it they are going to accept this lie again. This is a Christian nation, and this Christian nation can only survive on truth. And outside truth, we will fail to run the affairs of this country. So Thursday, Zambians will deal with their conscience. Where are the roads that are tarred in Solwezi? Where is the market? Where are those promises that were made? Are they being fulfilled? And the answer will be no. The question is, why should we think that if we vote for PF again, or for PF, then this time they'll be telling the truth? I want to commend the people of Northwestern Province, Solwezi in particular, that they gave us MMD for Solwezi Central. They gave us Honorable Mulusa for this constituency. And the reason why I believe that it was an intelligent decision is because the people of Solwezi, like all Zambians, must now make a decision that whosoever they take to parliament is capable. Is capable. And yes, I'm president of MMD, but I'm proud of my candidate because he is capable. I switch on the radio parliament when they are in parliament, and when Lucky was in the house and he takes the microphone, it should make every person in Solwezi Central proud. There's no issue he left untouched. Eloquent, intelligent, able to deal with those matters, and he dealt with them conclusively. There's nothing as good as being represented by an intelligent, articulate, and capable member of parliament. And Solwezi has that in our candidate, Lucky Mulusa. The reason his seat was nullified was not because he gave money to the church. All of us give money to the church. We should all give money to the church. But why was he nullified? Because the PF realized he was a dangerous tool in the hands of the opposition, because he never spared government when it comes to things that concern Solwezi Central and national matters. And therefore, I am looking to a place where the people of Solwezi Central do themselves what is right. Let's get a man there that will continue to articulate our concerns. Otherwise, the lies of PF will be enshrined in the very culture of our society, and Zambia shall not develop. I am confident the people of Solwezi Central are going to bring Honorable Lucky Mulusa back and send him back to the House to finish the 2 years so that we can continue to see the anticipated development in the constituency.
Thank you, Mr. President. Viewers, you are watching a special program sponsored by the MMD, and we have Dr. Nevas Mumba, President of the MMD, in the studios. We'll be going for a short break, and the man the President has been talking about will be joining us just after this short break. Thank you. joined now in the studio by Honorable Lucky Mulusa, MMD candidate for the September 11th by-election. Honorable, welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
Great. It's always a pleasure to have you in our studios. And we've just had great words coming from the President. And I just wanted quickly, before we get back to what we're discussing with the President, why should people vote for you this time around?
Well, people should vote for me because I never failed them. I never failed them at all. If you go by the Constitution, which describes the role of Parliament and consequently the duties of a Member of Parliament, I never failed at all. In fact, if you go to Parliament, if at all there is a performance monitoring and evaluation, you'd find that in the last Parliament, I could be one of the top performing parliamentarians. And one of the indicators that I can share with you is that one of the duties of a Member of Parliament is to move private members' motions. And like I said previously on a similar program like this one, there are 10 private members' motions that have been moved in this Parliament currently, and 5 of them were moved by myself, and 2 of them specifically affected Solwezi Central. I have already put in place a comprehensive plan on how to rebuild Solwezi and how to take Solwezi forward. And that was the first motion, and it was accepted by the government. What is remaining is implementation. It basically covers everything, and it would move Solwezi as a town from the structure of our towns, where our towns are cost centers rather than profit and economic centers. For me, I have suggested in that motion that our towns must be economic centers, so that we move away from this dependency syndrome by our cities. I mean, our cities, you have a situation where the government pays the salaries and that kind of stuff. That shouldn't be happening. They should be stand-alone entities. And like the President indicated here, the government should be in charge of the huge economic infrastructure undertakings, whereas the municipals must be in charge of service delivery. Then we'll move forward. And that's why they must vote for me.
The service delivery, I posed a question to the President just a few minutes ago. Is the MMD that is failing the people of Solwezi? Because you are the people running the council. There's no service delivery in Solwezi.
Well, we need to be very holistic, and we need to be fair. These councils you see, especially Solwezi, in fact, the councils in Northwestern Province, the councils in Western Province, and the councils in Southern Province have been managed by 3 political parties. For 27 years until 1990, they were managed by UNIP. From 1991 to 2001, they were managed by the MMD. From 2001 to 2006, in these provinces, UPND managed these councils. So if there's failure, then there's shared blame. The UPND must take the blame, PF must take the, UPND must take the blame, UNIP must take the blame, and equally MMD must take the blame. Now, for the MMD, we will be able to say we are trying to restructure a system that had been in place for 27 years, and everything had collapsed. There was a huge there was a huge task to do that. UPND took over at a time we had started restructuring. One of the things we did, for instance, was the selling of houses to sitting tenants. Now, in a way, we were disempowering the councils, but we were empowering individuals. And the hope for the MMD was that the individuals would invest in these structures, some of which had been built in the 60s. And the councils would then pick up more rates and taxes in place of the lost rentals. The UPND took over, and almost nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers that the PF actually managed councils. Most of the councils in Zambia, on the Copper Belt in Lusaka, were managed by the PF before 2011. But everybody talks about the MMD having failed. And that's why previously I said, if you are unable to identify where the problem lies, and you are unable to identify who is responsible, then you are totally lost. we need to do what I suggested in Parliament. I suggested that we needed to implement a broadly shared economic and human development strategy, where whatever we are doing, we put the human being at the center. But we keep on moving in circles. Now, coming back to Solwezi, Solwezi is faced with two challenges. The first challenge is that Solwezi is not a green city. It's not a greenfield project. It has been an existing town that was badly planned, a town that was neglected. When population was increasing, nobody cared to take care of the infrastructure planning and the social services dispensation planning. Nobody did that. And then suddenly we were overwhelmed by a huge population, and the town's economic infrastructure and social infrastructure could not sustain the pressures that come with a huge population. And that's why in my motion, I handed back that task to the government, that this is what we needed to do. We needed to put in place a funded, integrated urban development plan for Solwezi. And I'm glad that it was accepted. It hasn't just been funded nor implemented by the government. So if you were to ask me today to say who is to blame, the MMD, represented by myself, is not to blame because I wrote out that plan. The PF is to blame because they never implemented it. And there's money to implement it because that money comes from Solwezi, actually.
Great. Mr. President, no money to implement projects. The PF says vote for a PF candidate and they'll implement the projects. Is that the way to go?
Absolutely not. I think just a word on what the MP has said. He has given a very good picture of the different parties that have actually run councils. It's a very important point. From my point of view, even when we were in government, we were able to identify there was failure in the system we were using. All these three governments. Of course, we came from a one-party state, and MMD had the biggest challenge to restructure that. But I think that we need to go back to reorganization of local government. In terms of the decentralization policy, is it really effective? Is it working? If we change political parties, are we going to see more development? The history we have before us tells us any political party that comes to run councils faces the same problem. There's a failure of a system. It's a system we must fix. The local government decentralization program must be dealt with first before we continue to throw money in a system that is disjointed. And we are committed as MMD, as we move forward in forming government, that we are now going to look at the broken system, fix it in order for it to produce results. There is a statement that is made by this government again and again, that if you don't vote for a PF candidate, there will be no money for development, because we are the ones with the money. If you vote for an opposition, then there will be no development. No, that's the furthest from the truth. It is so wrong. It is so wrong and so
unconstitutional.
And so unconstitutional that anybody can think that in order for democracy operates on checks and balances. You know, you gotta have white, you gotta have black, you gotta have life operates in, you know, being different from the other. And we force government to do certain things because we see it from a different angle. So I think that if there was no need for us to win some seats and use those seats to argue on behalf of people on certain points, then there was no need to change from one-party state to a multi-party system of government. So anybody in this government who says you need to vote for an MP from PF is being unconstitutional and is flaunting the electoral regulations. And when that is heard and it's recorded and we can present it in court, that seat will be nullified. Because that is totally wrong information that you're giving. The money to develop Solwezi Central coming to Honorable Mulusa when he wins after Thursday is not going to come from the pocket of the President Sata in State House. That money is shared within Parliament. Parliament oversees the distribution of the developmental funding that goes to all these constituencies. And unfortunately for our country, every constituency receives the same kind of money when we go to CDF. And I think that is something that needs to be looked at, looking at the sizes of the different constituencies. But the important thing is that the money for development, even at national level, does not come from the pocket of the president. this money has the oversight of Parliament. And whether you are MMD or you are PF, MP, you are going to have the exact same amount of money, and you should have the exact same attention from government in order to make sure that every Zambian has access to their part of the pie, because they're entitled to it, whether they're in Solwezi or they're in Chinsali where PF is present.
Currently, Solwezi, like you have alluded, that it's a growing town, huge. I remember in the time of MMD, a lot of markets were being built across the country. Solwezi seems to have been left out. The other night, one of the ladies, a candidate from UNIP, was admiring the market in Mwenyirungu. Where have we gone wrong in Solwezi? The council, the honorable is saying you should blame UPND who have run this, but there's money now. I don't think that money which is there now was there when the UPND were running this.
Well, you can't say that, but basically I think what it is now is action time. This blame game must end. Yeah. We can't keep going back and forth. This one didn't do it. This one. Let's get. Honorable Laki is here, is listening to this, he has been very passionate about this. This is action time. Solwezi must develop very quickly, because the levels of investment are coming at a very fast rate. This is going to be the town to come to, like I've said. So I think the blame game should be over. The time to be able to put these things in practice, or rather in place, is now. I have mentioned that the PF promised many things here. Not only markets, they promised a modern, bus stop, for instance, in this place. Things that are very easy to put together. I think time has come now to roll out these programs for Northwestern Province. And I am convinced that moving forward from this point, even for me talking with my Member of Parliament, if there's anything I'll be doing in reminding him, it's these statements we are making. The people of Solwezi can no longer wait and be overlooked. There was a promise here by PF to build a university. That time they said University of Mathematics. And I stand on the ground, they want either University of Agriculture or Mining. And I agree with them. You see, the issue that I come from Muchinga province, where the current president comes from, and it's very painful for me to say this, that Mr. Sata promised certain things here, a university here, his party did. And instead of building even a college or something, he goes to Muchinga province, where I come from, and builds 2 universities and an academy for the police. Now, those 2 universities, we don't have the numbers in Chinsali to send to those universities. The population is very low. So one begins to think, is he doing that because he comes from there? I come from there, but I don't agree with that type of politics. I don't agree with that type of development. I think what would disjoint Zambia is when a leader in a country concentrates on where he comes from at the expense of other areas. And this is why our type of leadership, my type of leadership, is that Zambia must be in our hands, all of Zambia, regardless of tribe, regardless of direction. The developments must be equitable in all provinces. And that's my position, and that's the position of MMD, that we are going to continue, once back in government, to distribute this development in all provinces, as we did when we were in government. And I think that PF must honor on the promises they made to this town, to this province, and be accountable for the things they have not done.
Honorable Mulusa, you said that you have presented projects in Parliament to government. They are waiting for implementation. Come Thursday, you are elected as MP. Come 2016, no implementation. What will be the story? How are we going to force government to implement this?
Well, there's something that I've noticed about this government, that if you engage ministers one-on-one, things tend to move. And I do recall that Professor Nkanduluo, before she was removed as Minister of Local Government, I engaged her on the funded integrated urban development plan that I put forward for Solwezi. And she made several trips here. She started engaging the chiefs, and we started having several meetings, and she appointed a task force in her office to look at the implementation of that plan, and that task force came here and it made some presentations. So for me, I would say that engagement had some productive outcomes. But let me just step back and try to identify where the problem lies. The president has just guided us that let us run away from the blame game, and I agree with him. the reason at times people tend to point at others is out of ignorance, and also to remind others that before you point a finger at me, remember your role as well. And like I said, the UPND had the majority of councillors and MPs from 2001 to 2006 here, and no record to show for it. Similarly, in Western Province, they had 14 MPs out of 17 MPs, nothing to show for it. Southern Province, the same up to today. So we're saying that let us run away from the blame game, because everybody is guilty. Now, let me go back to the genesis of the confusion in development, because we can be arguing as we are arguing here about Solwezi. You visit the whole country, you find that perhaps the picture is replicating itself everywhere. I'll give you an example. If you go to church and you watch the preacher in front there, he usually has about at least 3 documents, you understand, besides the Bible. You'll find that he has the Bible as the main document, and probably he has the hymn book, and probably he has the notes that interpret the verses, and he starts preaching. And when they become experienced, they just use the Bible. Or others just, you know, others like somebody who is in this room, but who I do not want to mention, can speak without even using the Bible. By the way, that was a very wonderful sermon this morning, Mr. President.
I wish I was invited.
Now, for us, if you saw before Mr. Winter Kabimba left government, he always spoke about the PF manifesto, the PF manifesto. In fact, at one time, he distributed the PF manifesto to civil servants, senior civil servants, that they shall be guided by the PF manifesto. That was the highest demonstration of ignorance on the part of Mr. Winter Kabimba. Because the PF manifesto is neither here nor there, you understand? A manifesto must have a developmental strategy behind it. And that manifesto must just be a summary of the deliverables in the developmental strategy. When you say we are going to create 1 million jobs in 90 days, there has to be a document one must visit and see how it shall be done. Now, when you only have the manifesto and you don't have the strategy that gave birth to that manifesto, it means that you just gathered a few people together who know how to write in English, and they started putting up a wish list, a shopping basket. The question was posed here. A market was built in Mwinilunga and not here. The question is why? A developmental project is somewhere else and it's not in Zambezi. The question is why? Our departure point, just like in a home, when a father gets a salary, they sit down and say, this child needs shoes, that child needs a pen, that child needs a book, that child needs a shirt. That would be the mother presenting that to the father. And then the father distributes the money accordingly. For us, our developmental strategy are all outcomes of political expedience. Somebody wants somebody to be voted into office, they put up a project. That project is not informed by any scientific study. And the scientific study that I'm talking about are the 10-year census reports. When you go to the census report, it contains everything. It tells you, in an area, how many stillborn births took place, how many children died before the age of 5, the rate at which population grew, how many people are earning between 5,000 to 10,000 kwacha per month. It tells you everything. And when it tells you everything, you then draw up a strategy on how to solve those challenges that the census report has produced. So, take Solwezi for instance. While the average population growth in Zambia is 2.8 per annum, 2.8% per annum, Solwezi's population grew by over 400% in the 10 years that the population in Zambia was growing by 2.8% per annum. What that means is that if the average in the country grew by 28% over 10 years, and Solwezi recorded 400% over 10 years, then you need to draw up a strategy to ameliorate the impact of such a growth, meaning that the Solwezi Chingola Road should have been priority number 1 in this country. Putting up township roads, putting up social infrastructure, social houses, and that kind of stuff should have been a priority. We are talking about creating a copper belt that is more sustainable than the copper belt that we previously had. The question is, when we talk about sustainability, what are we talking about? When we talk about sustainability, we are saying sustainable development is one in which the current generation takes care of itself without compromising future generations' ability to take care of themselves. What do you then do? The high population in Solwezi, the dwindling mineral resources create a challenge. We're going to have a huge population, and we won't have the mines that attracted that huge population. So then what do? What you do is you create industries to support the mines. And those industries will be created to support these mines. And because these mines and the mines in Kolwezi, Lubumbashi, and everywhere around this place import their consumables from South Africa, the industries you create here, beyond supplying these mines, will be supplying those other mines in Kolwezi, Kinshasa, and everywhere. When our mine closes, Solwezi will still remain a running city because it will have industries whose markets will be in DRC. Those are the plans that we should start thinking of. We cannot be seeing even nails being imported from South Africa to be consumed by these mines. We need to change that. And the MMD started doing so. Remember that the MMD created the CEC, the MMD recapitalized the DBZ, the MMD changed Zambia Privatization Agency into a development agency. And these are the things that should have been taken forward to try and create sustainable cities so that even when the mines are closed, we will still have industries where the people that will move out of the mines will find employment and will not have ghost towns. Now the question is, how do we do that? We go back to what the president said here, that people must be very serious when they are putting leadership in place. This is not the time to joke with leadership. In other political parties, they are doing a don't you kubeba. Don't you kubeba that our candidate can't perform. So they are hiding their candidates, they are shielding their candidates. Their candidates are not undergoing public scrutiny. I'm sure you haven't interviewed any other candidate other than the 3 of us who sat here, including myself, who is sitting here for the second time. If the PF candidate has to be interviewed, it's Mr. Namlambe who will come and sit here. If the PF candidate has to be interviewed, it is Chishimba, Honorable Shimba Kambwili, who will come and sit here. If the PF candidate has to address people, it's his mother addressing people. Him is just driving in a vehicle and jumping up and down with the finished shocks because of the state of our roads. And nobody cares, nobody's calling the PF to account to say, this person you are saying, if you give this person to us, then we are going to bring you development. Can we hear from his own mouth what he understands about development? I'm able to articulate that, I'm able to put it in writing, I'm able to lecture about development. And when my president decided to adopt me, he did his job and did it very well.
Great. Honorable, back to you, still with you. You have explained very well. Now, when you get to the bottom people in Solwezi, people in wisdom, people in Gizingi, we carry out news items of terrible bridges, no roads actually, no bridges and so on. Between now and 2016, are we going to do you have any priority areas where we're going to see basic bridges built, basic roads put in place? Because that's what the ordinary person, before they think of even going to look for a job, they need to cross the river.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, of course, I have an inventory of the projects that need to be undertaken. In fact, your crew captured me going around with a gentleman from disaster management, I think Mr. Cavasso. And we captured all the bridges that needed to be done. And I approached the disaster management under the Vice President's office. And we agreed with Honorable Kalaba. By then he was one of the deputy ministers there. And we put up a date for us to come and visit them so that he could then give guidance for the release of the funds to implement those projects. And then I was kicked out of Parliament, and that work stalled. But let me talk about the role of a member of Parliament. I think there's overstretching the role of a member of Parliament. Even the money that the member of Parliament is given, CDF, it actually has its own guidance. You are not supposed to use CDF on capital projects that must be undertaken by government or other government agencies. CDF is meant for social projects. You're talking of community schools. Rather not social projects, but community projects. You're talking of community schools. You're talking of community health centers, where you feel that the government has really missed out on this one. You come in and fill up the gap with CDF, and CDF is so little. If you were to build a community school, a fully fledged community school, out of CDF, you can only manage one. Especially if you are going to add, say, 4 teachers' houses, you can only manage one. It's so little. To spend CDF on a bridge is actually going against the regulations. But we do push, we do force these things to be undertaken. The West Bridge is actually the Wisdom Bridge right now. I feel like using my own money to fix that bridge. It's unfortunate that I'm going through elections. I could have done it. I mean, we do these things at times when you see that there's no CDF funding and the government is not willing to move. For instance, I replaced the roof at Kandundu basic school using my own money. It cost me 38 million kwacha then. I did that. You understand? So this is the challenge. For as long as we are going to continue planning without the basis, without a scientifically established basis, we'll miss the plot, because everything else will be dependent on lobbying. Everything else will be dependent on political expedience. And that's why Mr. Sata put up 2 new universities, in addition to the police academy, which was being put up there by the MMD government. It means that Chinsali has 3 universities. Now, if there was a social study to see what a university can do to a particular area, then we could have looked for another needy area and spread out these institutions so that we can even abide by the preamble of our constitution. The preamble of our constitution says, we the Zambian people declare that we shall govern ourselves through a multi-party system, and that we shall respect people's rights to belonging to, association and whatever. Yeah, the right of association. And the PF constitution also states the same, that it respects people's rights to belong to political parties of their choice. But look at the most educated man in PF, Dr. Guy Scott. He is the first one who says, give us a PF MP so that you can receive the development that you need. And when they explain it, they say it's because this one will be talking to the government. You don't need to talk to the government to deliver development. It should actually be all, it should just be mechanical through the policies and procedures that we've set for ourselves.
Honorable Kambuli says you didn't go to, you have never been to his office to lobby for any projects.
He's a liar. He's a liar. I've been there. In fact, I should have reminded them. Whenever the PF colleagues come and sit here, I just choose to be a gentleman, because I'm a gentleman. Otherwise, I would be phoning and tearing them apart. But I choose not to. I have been to Honorable Chimba Kambili's office on several occasions, and most of these guys are my friends. Sorry to call them guys, the honorable members of Parliament. Yes, we are friends. And that's why even when you see them campaigning, they're not campaigning with the kind of viciousness that PF is known for. because they know that luck is our friend. In fact, they need me back in parliament because I used to help them. You understand? I used to help them perform. You know, and that's why the PF is going slow on this. They're not even convinced that I should be replaced by Newton Maro. So don't believe him. I went to his office. I went to ask for JZs. I went to suggest ways in which to assist our youth here. I went to advise him on how he can actually use the mines to complement his efforts in terms of delivering on the youth challenges.
We've seen across the country that districts are being have been created by the PF government. In your own view, when you look at Solwezi, don't you think there are areas where we can have a district somewhere?
Yeah, I'll be very brief on that because I want to raise some other issues before we close. I think firstly we must accept the fact that the establishment of districts in itself is a concept of development, developing certain areas so that the distribution of goods and services can be devolved to a group and set up an administration that will take care of the needs of the people in that boma, in that district. I think that PF itself promised Northwestern Province that they had wanted to create a district, I think, within the Luana area, and they called it Mbezi. So they haven't done that. And secondly, I think that they are going about it the wrong way. To establish a district, like what has happened in other places where they have established districts, they have run into a problem. They have first hired workers, and without any infrastructure as to where these people are going to work from. Some of them are working under trees. They, you know, police, whatever they are called, they are living in places they should never be because there is absolutely nothing. So I think that there has to be a way of better planning, which is something the PF is not gifted with. And I think the problem we have now is that when you ask yourself an intelligent question, what will Zambia look like next month under PF? You can't see it. What will Zambia look like in 10 years under PF? You can't see it. The problem is this: they are not clear on what they want to do. They are just ruling. Wake up in the morning, go to the office, make decrees, and threaten investors, threaten road contractors. You don't govern like that. If I give you 7 days to do this road, if you don't do it, you come and see. You go to UTH, I give you 3 days. If you don't do it, I'll fire you. That power governance is a sign of a failed government. A government that governs is in dialogue with its people, with the institutions and the sectors of that society. They dialogue in order to move development forward. So PF is facing this major problem. And one area that is of major concern to us as MMD is the area of how the workers, public worker, has been treated. You remember that when they came into government, they did something that is really unthinkable. They decided to freeze, to bring about the wage freeze. At the same time as the wage freeze came, then the standard of living rose. That is when they removed the subsidies from the essentials in our country. And when I say essentials, I'm talking about in shea, which comes from mini meal. And now from 37 kwacha, as it was under MMD. In Chinsali, where I come from, it's at 95 kwacha per bag. So there's a stagnant salary for our workers, and there's also a job freeze in the civil service. We left about 83 schools finished as MMD, planning to build more schools. We needed, I think, thousands of teachers, to actually 100,000 to be considered to bring on board in order to meet the deficit in the country. There's a job freeze, which means some of the schools in the rural areas. I came from Mangango there not too long ago, where I found a school from grade 1 to grade 7 with 2 teachers. I asked them, how do you teach? They said, we will bring grade 1 up to grade 4 in one class, and then grade 5 and grade 6 in another class, then only grade 7, we do it alone. Now, help me. The reason why Africa is in its current state when we were colonized is because we had 2 educational systems, one inferior one for the Bantus and one for the whites. This is exactly what's happening in the rural areas. What can you teach A, E, I, O, U in grade 1? grade 4, you are trying to read structure and sentence and do arithmetic. How do you combine that, except that the result of that type of education is shambles and a failed educational system? Our people will continue being poor. So we have a situation here which I think that we need to consider in providing teachers and ensure that the job freeze is removed, the wage freeze is removed, because this wage freeze is unconstitutional. Number 2, it's illegal. ILO demands that every group of workers must have a right to bargain freely for their pay. We have stopped the Zambian people. We tried to freeze salaries in MMD, and we were sued. And the current Minister of Labor was part of those people that rose up against us to sue the government of MMD, and we lost the case for freezing the salaries. And if the public workers went ahead and sued government, they would win the case. And I think that it's illegal what is happening in the country. And so we come here in Solwezi. We are dealing with the issue of the mine workers here, where an agreement was made, a 3-year agreement. How do you do that? 25%, which means they say 10% this year, 8% in 2015, and in 2016, 7%. Once you bind the workers like that, there's no science involved in how the economy is going to move and how the standard of living is going to be and the cost of living. So I think the workers here are going through a difficult time. Many things were promised to them in the mines here, and I think that it was signed, that agreement was signed by the Minister of Labor. So we are thinking that there is need for us as a people to look at the welfare of a Zambian worker and be able to accept that life has become complicated. If for those of us in government, or who have been in government before, or the current government officials in PF, they don't feel what the Zambians feel. They're driving nice cars, their fuel is being bought, they're living in government houses, they're eating morning, lunch, and evening. Our people don't have that. Their salaries are frozen, there are no jobs in the country, and there's no money. We demand that we have a working government. And the MMD, if we form government next week, MMD is the only party that will kick into running government without a miss of a heartbeat. We have the experience, we have the people that understand governance, we have a history of succeeding in running the economy, and we also understand what planning is all about. And the Zambian people and the people of Solwezi voting for Lucky Mulusa on Thursday are doing exactly the same thing. There will be no miss of a heartbeat. You get back into that house like nothing has changed and raise the issues of this constituency. And this is why I am convinced that our people here in Solwezi are going to do the right thing on Thursday. Let's not do politics. Let's do development and vote right and vote from our hearts and make sure that Solwezi is back on track to become the greatest town that Zambia has ever had, and I'm very confident it shall.
Mr. President, on another note, possibly away from this, don't you think the best way we'll be able to see development, possibly as here in the northwestern province, is having a federal system of governance? What is your take on that?
Well, if you look at our decentralization policy of MMD, it went very far. Of course, that it has not been fully implemented, and it was never fully implemented when we were in government. We have looked at different countries and outfits, like South Africa, we look at Germany, we look at the United States itself, which has a serious federal system of government. The reason they develop quickly is because you give power to the people. And if I give you, like Honorable Mulusa said, one thing that MMD did was to give house ownership to individuals. Now, when I give you a house and it's yours, I come back in 2-3 months, it will be totally different. The motivation you have to work on your house is nothing like a house that belongs to government. So I think that we are at a place now where MMD would like to remind the Zambian people that if we need to move forward, we need to go back to understanding that MMD was on track and that we would like to continue where we left off. And in order for us to continue where we left off, we need to start by winning these by-elections. And I'm sorry that I've left your question hanging, but I think that this election coming is a letter that we're going to write to the Patriotic Front to say, listen, we believed a lie, but never again. We are not stupid that we can continue to believe lies over and over again. And the best way to send a message to State House, to the Patriotic Front, is not through anything but voting right. We are also aware that there is a plan to rig these elections, because there's nobody who is talking PF. It doesn't. I've just come from Kasenengwa. I've come from Vubwi. Last night I came from Zambezi West. There's nobody talking PF. Nobody wants PF. But PF knows that the only way to win the election is to rig it. But we have also sent a message to all our structures that this one will die for it, to the last drop of blood, to defend our vote in the polling stations. MMD is not a violent party. I am a pastor who is a leader, but I've told them, in the name of Jesus, take your stand in that polling station. Let no devil steal any one of those votes. And I'm sure that if we can be vigilant, there is not a single seat PF can win from this round of elections. And I encourage the Zambian people to do the right thing this Thursday. We are ready to get Honorable Lucky Mulusa back in the House, and by doing that, we are reminding the PF we are not happy with the lies that have been taught to us. We are not happy with the condition of Solwezi. We are not happy with the poverty levels rising in Zambia and the cost of living in the country. That's the only message they'll get. That's the letter we want to write after Thursday.
Honorable, your message to the people of Solwezi?
Well, my message to the people of Solwezi is, please wake up and think clearly, and look at you are being you look at how you are being viewed by some political parties. When the people of Solwezi look at the UPND, they should ask themselves a question: did they give them the right candidate out of all the candidates who were standing? Is the candidate that they are giving them better than Mr. Kasonso, who applied and who is a seasoned civil servant and who can straight away qualify to be a cabinet minister? Why was he left out? Why was Watson Lumba left out? Why was Mark Kalemba left out? Why did they give them an inexperienced young man of just about 32 years? Why? When you go to some of these political parties and where they have dominance, like for the UPND in Southern Province, they have credible men and women for candidature into their seats. You have Gary Nkombo for Mazabuka Central. You have Jack Mwimbu for Monze Central. You have Cornelius Mwita for Choma Central. You have Request Muntanga for Kalomo Central. Why are these powerful men and women used by the UPND in Southern Province and poor candidates used by the UPND in Northwestern Province? The reason is simple. When UPND forms government, UPND wants to give all the cabinet positions to people of Southern Province. And when the people of Northwestern Province complain, they will be reminded that they don't have credible members of parliament. And yet, that disposition is being created by the UPND today. So, my message is that reject candidates who do not fit the shoes of the candidates from other provinces, such as Southern Province. The same message goes for the PF. Why was Dr. Ndumba rejected? Why was the Sekelech, Mr. Sekelech, Edwin Sekelech, rejected? These are exposed and educated men who could have properly represented these constituents under the PF. And if the UPND had chosen Dr. Ndumba or Mr. Sekelech, and if the PF had chosen Dr. Ndumba and Mr. Sekelech, and the UPND had chosen Mr. Kasonso, we were going to have an excellent debate here amongst ourselves. But because these haven't done that, they are shielding their candidates, they are hiding them. Wake up. These political parties are not interested in building credible leadership for this province. The reason is simple. They want to perpetuate a situation where our wealth will keep on being taken away with no proper representation to put a stop to that. That's why they are doing that. So the people of Solwezi Central, UPND does not love you. Don't even cheat yourself. The PF does not love you. Don't even cheat yourself. If they did, they could have given you proper candidates who applied to stand on these political parties. Get back to the MMD. The MMD is your party. The MMD delivered democracy. The MMD brought didn't bring Christianity, but declared Zambia as a Christian nation. That is a very, very important development that took place. And the reason we are suffering under the PF is that they've got no respect at all for the Lord. If they had, they would care for Lord's people the way they care for the people that they've chosen to care for, under the criterion of only having been given the vote. So come back to MMD. MMD is the only political party that accommodates everybody. MMD is the only political party that does not belong to a tribe and doesn't belong to any province. And that's why MMD has had 4 presidents, all of them from different regions of Zambia, and all of them chosen using the criterion of competence. Vote for me.
That's good.
Mr. President, finally, you've come here a few days before the election. What is your word to the electorate and generally to the people of Northwestern who seem to be crying over the lack of development?
Firstly, I would like to thank the people of Northwestern Province, in particular the Solwezi Central, that they did the right thing in 2011 when they voted for us as MMD and they voted for Lucky Mulusa. Nothing has changed. PF has not demonstrated that they are a government that is better than MMD. So I'll be very surprised if anybody said what they are going to now vote for PF after PF has messed up in the manner that it has. I think there's no need for them to change course. MMD was voted into Parliament by the people of Solwezi Central, and I see them doing exactly the same thing so that Honorable Lucky Mulusa can continue. 2, MMD, like as already alluded to, I'm glad that Honorable Mulusa has already intimated this. This is a Sunday, and wanted to assure the Zambian people that the declaration of Zambia as a Christian nation is a major development for us, where we make God the central, or the Lord Jesus Christ, the central theme of our development and moving forward. And me, as president of MMD, I have been a pastor for 33 years. I do understand that outside God, our efforts are fruitless. We may look like we are succeeding, but really outside God, our labors are in vain. It is interesting how much progress would make if we insisted on having political parties that when they promise, they want to do it because they fear God. The reason why PF can promise and not do it, there's no fear for God. They just think this is a game. They call it politics is just a game. To me, it's not a game. It's about human lives, being able to have some kind of sanity and respect and dignity. And that can only come because you love God and you fear God. Finally, I think that moving forward, after the 2011 experiment of leaving MMD, where you are having your inputs for fertilizer, you are having prices that are affordable, where you are having houses that are affordable, where you are buying cars. Everybody was buying cars under MMD. We never used to have everybody buying cars. Today you have your house servant driving to work in a vehicle. It never used to happen. But MMD created that success story. And because of that, we got used to it and decided to do an experiment. We experimented on another political party. You know, they came Uwato, Pamaka, and we, you know, like men do, they look at another girl in red shoes, they think the current wife is too old, she's big, her ears are big, let them try the other girl in red shoes. They went to PF and the board, and to realize that the PF cannot deliver. You know, they can't have babies. So all of a sudden they start to miss their wife, and we're saying, come back home. Let's not have another experiment. I heard somebody say it was MMD, now it's PF, now it is UPN, do another part. This is not how you move a country. A country is a serious institution. You don't just keep experimenting and hoping that you are going to get it right. I think the Zambian people now are comparing between MMD and the PF because there's a clear comparison. And the people on the Copper Belt where PF was popular are all saying, let's go back home. Let's go back to MMD a party that understands our problems, the party that improved agriculture, the party that gave us what we needed in terms of human dignity. And I say to the people of Solwezi on Thursday, as you go on Thursday to vote, may I appeal to you, do the right thing. Vote from your heart. Don't vote because they give you money in your hands or a chitenge. Vote for the sake of your children moving forward. And Lucky Mulusa is our candidate on the MMD ticket. I have every confidence that Lucky is going to make you proud. He has already demonstrated it, and I know he's going to do it again. And thank you so much for joining us.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable, wish you all the
Thank you
best.
very
Thank you. On a lighter note, how's Mama doing?
She's doing great. She, you know I've got a grandchild, so
Oh,
now I'm not
congratulations.
just one of the guys jumping around. So
you.
I always look at his picture every night, so I'm really
We are
happy.
grateful to God about that.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Viewers, that's all we had and we could accommodate tonight. We just want to say thank you very much for tuning in. May God bless you and have a pleasant night. Good night.